Perfect. I'm seeing more people joining right now. Right, just to let people know, we're gonna get started in 5 minutes. Right, cool. I think we can get started, Stephen.
Great.
So yeah, first of all, thank you everyone for joining our weekly talk. And this is hosted by Seattle Entrepreneurship Club, which is also known as SEC. So SEC is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to try help the local entrepreneurs in this community. And SEC was founded like 10 years ago, back in 2008. It's fully run by a group of volunteers in part-time. And we have done quite a few things to help entrepreneurs, like mentor program, or startup service related service providers, or like things like startup competition, or we could talk like this. So it has been I am Chen Chen. I'm today's host, and it has been a really great journey to like trying to help join SEC and trying to do something in this community. And we just for your information, and we do need more volunteers like us to help this community here. And well, like whether you're interested in being entrepreneurs or want to contribute to this community, feel free to reach out to us. And yeah, that's this much about SEC. And for me, I full-time work in Microsoft, in specifically in Azure Machine Learning group. And it has been 5 years for me in Microsoft, so it's been a long time. But Microsoft is great. And yeah, that's it for my introduction. So let's welcome Stephen, today's speaker. And Stephen is I'm just giving some basic information about Stephen. Stephen is a partner PM director of Power Automate in Microsoft, but he was working in a startup. Actually, he was a founder, and which was MetricsHub. And MetricsHub was acquired by Microsoft just after less than a year after it was founded. So I believe Stephen is gonna share some juicy stories or secret how the startup can be acquired by Microsoft after just such a short time. So yeah, let's welcome Stephen. By the way, we'd like to have an interactive like way for this talk. So feel free to raise your hand or type in the chat if you have any question, and I can help you guys to make sure you can talk when you have a question. All right, thank you. Let's welcome Stephen.
Great, thank you very much. So I'm going to go ahead and share. So I have a few slides that I'm going to walk through. You know, definitely as I go along, feel free to ask questions. You can try to make this as interactive as possible over Zoom. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just give some background on kind of what our experience was with MetricsHub. So MetricsHub, we originally started back in 2012, and I'll share a little bit about the timeline. But specifically, what I'll be talking about is how we got the idea, how we got started, how did we get acquired by Microsoft, and really what was the experience after we were acquired. So some background on the timeline and the company itself. So we actually started working on this project in the middle of 2012, which looking back now is kind of crazy how long ago that seems. I mean, a month ago seems like that years ago now at this point. So 2012, 8 years ago is a long time. But what had happened is, myself, Stephen, and then two of my colleagues, Charles and Ilya, we knew that we wanted to build something of our own. We knew that it was important to try our hands at inventing something from the bottom up, and really a startup is a great way to do that. So we started reading about startups and how they worked and what types of ways to get them started. And the number one thing that we learned about was accelerators. And I think the accelerator is really the thing that made the difference for us. Without the accelerator, I guarantee you we would have not been successful at all. And specifically what we did is we applied to a Techstars accelerator. So, still a thing to this day. Techstars is very successful. They had lots of companies that have gone through the program. So, I definitely recommend checking that out. But what we did is we came up with an idea, and the three of us, we already knew each other from before. So, we said, hey, we're gonna try something out, and we did a pitch to Techstars. They have a lengthy application process. I think I read something like they got something like 600 applications, and there are 10 selected for each class. Techstars is a little bit different than something like YC, which at the time at least only had basically one class at a time. The way that Techstars did it is they had classes kind of around the world, and some of them were themed. So this particular accelerator that we did was specifically sponsored by Microsoft. So you see here already Microsoft is kind of coming in a little bit. And what they did is the only condition of this sponsorship was you had to run on what at the time was called Windows Azure. These days, it's Microsoft Azure. But that was the only condition of the Microsoft sponsorship. But it was a Techstars program that was run by folks from Techstars, and so we applied to the project, and we got in September. So in September 2012, we quit our previous jobs. Something that's really important that should become clear as I kind of talk through some of the things that we had to do to be successful. When you are in an accelerator, you can't have split attention. You need to be 100% focused to your startup, which means that you can't have two jobs. You got to have exactly one job, and that's making your company successful in the accelerator. So we quit our old jobs, went all in on Techstars, and the accelerator itself wasn't very long. It went from September to January. And then we had Demo Day. Demo Day is when we kind of share our wares with the world. And then 3 months later, we got acquired by Microsoft. So you can think of that journey from the middle of 2012 to March 2013, less than a year. And then something that personally we are very proud of is it only took us another 3 months to fully integrate our offering with Microsoft Azure. And we launched at the end of June, which I guess is a little bit over 3 months, but you get the idea. To the first question, where did we get the idea? And the original idea, these days will probably sound kind of comical, was performance monitoring for Windows Phone game developers. So we knew for a fact that there were people out there building games for mobile devices. And for iOS and Android, there were lots of SDKs out there for game developers, for people who are building these applications to understand kind of what's going on in their apps. But for Windows Phone, there wasn't really anything out there. It was a complete greenfield. So we were like, hey, this is a great idea for a startup. There's all these game developers building for Windows Phone. They don't have a way to understand what's going on inside their applications. The Microsoft built-in SDKs are pretty weak. So let's do that. That's what our startup is going to be. And that was what our original pitch to Techstars actually was. Now, these days, it might sound kind of funny because there is no Windows Phone anymore. So the idea that we would build a startup predicated on an application ecosystem specific to Windows Phone might sound kind of funny. And the fact of the matter is, even at the time, it didn't make any sense. So even before we got into the accelerator, after our initial pitch, we actually pivoted the company. It wasn't an entire pivot, but we said, okay, let's do monitoring for game backend. So hosting games in the cloud, the cloud is going to be where it is. Well, it wasn't what our idea ended up being either. We pivoted to using to building monitoring for services hosted in Azure. And by the time we started the accelerator, this was our idea. But this isn't what we ended up with either. We actually ended up doing was auto-scaling for services hosted in Azure. And the point I'm trying to make with this slide is the idea isn't really as important as the process that you go through. An idea is a cheap thing, really. An idea is just something in your head. What matters is how do you build a product that addresses a real customer pain point and deliver that to market. And this is what we learned through the accelerator. So this is a toolkit which is actually available today. This isn't exactly the toolkit that we used inside of Techstars, but it has a lot of the same core ideas. This is modern. So if you go that URL, you could actually check it out yourself. But a lot of these steps, especially the earlier steps, are exactly what we did. So the first thing that we did is we built a lean canvas. And this is the exact lean canvas that we had on the first day of the accelerator. You can see the timestamp there is accurate. This was September 29th, 2012. And this is what we came in to the accelerator with. The structure of the lean canvas is set up to take you through what do you need for a minimum viable product. What do you need to build kind of a solution? And on the left, it has the problem. What is the problem that you're trying to solve? That's really, really important, is to understand why are you doing what you're doing. So by this time, we have pivoted to cloud monitoring. So you can see, some of the things that we had. People need monitoring because it's difficult to understand what's happening inside of their cloud service. Understanding the existing alternatives that are out there is really important, right? Because you can have a great idea, but if there's 5 other companies that are doing it and doing it better, then you're never going to be successful. So that was an important piece. Then we have the solution. What are we going to do? And what is the key activity we're going to ask our customers to go through to be successful? As you get a little further in, you have the unique value proposition. What is the thing that is unique about your service, about your product? And at the time, you can see this is really not very well formed, right? This is day one. So we had a lot of learning and growing to do. So we're like, oh, we'll simplify monitoring and growing your service. That's unique, right? Well, I can guarantee you it was not unique. There were a million other services that have this same unique value proposition. So that means it isn't actually unique. But this is the process that you walk through. It's about the framework. It's about understanding the tool and then building it out over time. So I'm going to stop here, see if there's any questions or thoughts so far.
Since no questions now.
Okay, great. So what would I say the number one takeaway is if you want to know there is no secret, but I would say if there is a secret that sometimes you may think of as not being self-intuitive, it's you got to talk to customers. So the reason I bring this up is there's different philosophies for how to do startups, and one of those philosophies is this idea of stealth mode. And the idea with stealth mode is you have this brilliant idea, right? And you're going to work on this idea, and you're going to go really hard on this idea for months or years, and then you're going to release it to the world, and it's going to be magical, and everybody's going to love it, and it's going to be worth $1 billion. And from my personal experience, from what we did successfully in MetricsHub, that absolutely is not the great approach for a startup that you want to be successful. Because if you're only talking to yourself, you're not understanding what are the real pain points you're going to solve with customers. So we really broke this fear almost immediately of, being in stealth mode, not talking to anybody. Like, that is a recipe for failure, at least from what we were seeing. So the number one thing that we did is we talked to customers. Before we even started the accelerator, they were super clear, you have to talk to customers. And that's how we were able to pivot our ideas initially from a Windows Phone game developer. And I'm going to cheat a little bit on that one. We didn't talk to customers for that because we couldn't find anybody who wanted it. And if you can't find anybody who even has that pain point, that's a pretty good signal that the thing that you're trying to build isn't a real area that's gonna be successful. So that type of pivot, I think, is important. But during Techstars, I would say the thing that we did the most, the thing that sticks in my memory the strongest, is just every single week, every single day, talking to people about the product, listening to what their pain points are, and building based on that. That, if there's any secret, it's that you just got to get out of the office. You got to walk on the street, or in reality these days, probably not walk on the street, but get onto Zoom. Get onto Zoom and talk to people and just understand what's going on. So people will often ask me, well, how do you do that? The most obvious one is use your network. That was a little bit of a cheat, though, because everybody always says that. And the obvious question comes, OK, I've talked to everybody I know. What happens then? I only know 100 people or something that I can talk to about this. So there's lots of other tactics you can try. And one of the things that we did is we knew by this point, that we were going after people who were Azure customers. So one of the things we did is we literally went to public Azure case studies. And we went to Google and we just searched Google for companies and startups who said they use Azure. And then we guessed what their email addresses might be by just emailing CEO first name at companyname.com, or first letter of first name dot last name at companyname.com. Because the CEO, who the CEO is usually public. Generally, the email address of the CEO for a company isn't going to be public. And we did the same thing with CTOs, because we knew that we were going after probably somebody who was more technical. So we went to LinkedIn, we went to Crunchbase, we found the CEOs and CTOs of customers of Azure, and we just emailed them. And we created this pitch email that was a little bit like an elevator pitch that just asked for help. That was another really important tactic, was don't push something on these people, because some people are empathetic and altruistic. And if you go out there and you say, hey, we're a small company, we're just getting started, we'd really love the experience that you have as a CTO of a successful company running on Azure, so that way we can build a better product. That pitch worked surprisingly well. There's a lot of people out there who, when somebody asks for help, they're willing to give it if they're genuine and it's something that aligns with what they're looking to do and what they want. So it wasn't, what I can tell you what would not have worked is giving emails to CEOs saying, we have a solution for you that can solve your Azure monitoring problems. It's like that's a sales email. Everybody, I personally get tons of emails like that. They go straight into junk, right? Spam emails. But having an email of somebody coming and say, hey, we're a small company. We love your advice and your experience because we think that you have a unique perspective. That's a very different perspective. So that, I think, was one of the best tactics that we tried to get people to talk to us about our problems. So in actually conducting the customer interviews, the most important thing that we did is we didn't suggest solutions up front. The thing that you have to do is you have to ask them what their pain points are. Because if you suggest solutions, that becomes what we call an ice cream question, which is, hey, I asked you, do you want ice cream? And everybody says yes. I mean, I'm sure there are some people who say no, but these days, I could really go for some ice cream. So everybody is going to say yes, right, to that question. That doesn't help you get meaningful data, though, right? The point of these customer interviews is to understand what customers genuinely need. And providing them with a packaged solution isn't going to get you the data you need to understand whether or not they need that product. Instead, if you flip it around and ask, what is it about your Azure services, running your Azure services, that is painful? What do you waste a bunch of time on? What is something that is just extraordinarily frustrating every single day? If you ask that question, you will get genuine answers that you, as the person who is designing the product, can then map to a solution. Because it isn't the job of the customer to come up with the solution or even to recognize the solution. You know, it's a tired quote at this point, but you know, Henry Ford has the famous, very famous quote of, you know, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And this is that point, you know, times 1,000. You can't ask customers what they want. You have to ask them what their pain point is, and then it's up to you, building the product, to understand how to build something that meets their needs. So yeah, so I'll stop here again, just to see if there's any.
Yeah, Stephen, we got a question. The question is, how do you convince other people what you learned from customers is valid?
So yeah, that's a great question. You know, a lot of it is just having the data to back it up. The more customers that you talk to, the more evidence that you have. Saying, you know, hey, I talked to 3 people and this is my hypothesis, is a very, very different statement than saying I talked to 30 people and this is what I heard. And it also depends on who you talk to, right? If you talk to, you know, 3 of your friends, you know, that's going to be a biased audience. You still may get feedback. And, you know, when we were at the very beginning, the initial people that we talked to, that was network, right? That was just people that we knew. So that feedback wasn't as valid. But if you're trying to convince somebody else that the feedback you're getting is real, just share the data of, you know, we talked to, you know, 15 CTOs and 5 CEOs of companies, and this is what we heard. Here are quotes. Here's verbatim feedback of what people are saying, and that, you know, that maps, we think, to these solutions. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I don't think that the person who asked the question can talk right now because he was typing in the Q&A. So got it, yeah, okay. I believe that answered the question.
Great. And I think ultimately, when it comes to customer interviews, the thing that you get to towards the end of the process, you know, after you've done this a bunch of times and you start coming up with a solution, you can show them the solution after you've had the conversation with them and ask them if that would meet their needs. And the thing that is most important in that last stage is if when you show them a solution, their eyes light up and they get really excited, you can sense that excitement. That means that you're getting towards something that has product market fit. And that product market fit is really essential to having a successful startup, because without product market fit, you may not have something that anybody truly genuinely needs. If you don't have something that excites the customers you're going after, that means one of 2 things. Either the product you're building is not there yet, or you're talking to the wrong customers, right? I mean, it can be either, right? Maybe you change your target market, but you genuinely need to make sure that when you're doing these interviews, when you talk to customers, that their eyes light up, you know, their voice raises, that they really get to a point where this is something that they would be like, literally the best possible situation is they say, I love it. How much can I pay you now? I want to pay you now. When you have that, you know that you have something that has product market fit. So some of the other things that were really important about the accelerator that we found is mentorships. So even if you do everything that I just described, you talk to customers, use the lean canvas, but you don't have people around you who have experience and who have connections, it's going to be very, very difficult to be successful. So inside of Techstars, one of the advantages of the accelerator is there are mentors who will just come to the accelerator because they know it is a place where there are companies that want to get started. So like it naturally brings people in. But the accelerator isn't the only way to get mentorships, right? It can be people in the industry. It can be people inside the network. It can be people who are on this meeting today, right? Anybody could potentially be a mentor. But the important thing about the mentor is they have to have experience and they have to be able to make connections for you. Because the connections that you make in the startup world, in groups like this, or in any other types of venues, are really, really important, because connections are how you get customers, connections are how you get investors, connections are how you get partners. So being able to have those one-on-one conversations is really important. But particularly for mentors, they are going to ask hard, difficult questions, and that's really important, right? You need people who are willing to challenge you, who are willing to, there's the question of like, how do I prove to people that the customer feedback I'm hearing is valid? Well, the people asking you that question, like, that is good that they're asking that question, because they want to be certain that you actually have done the groundwork, that you have the evidence, that you are genuinely convinced that what you're doing is the right path. So yeah, definitely making sure that you have mentors, that you have that type of experience is really important. And there were lots of other activities that we did inside the accelerator besides customer validation. And one of the things we did is we did pitch practice. Literally every single week, we would refine our pitch. We would literally go through the full elevator pitch, go through the deck, really refine that muscle, because you never know when you're going to have to pitch, right? You may have to pitch tomorrow. And if you don't have that experience, that muscle that you're building, it's going to be a problem. And also getting design feedback, having other people just walk through the product. At Microsoft, one of the big things that we do that I think is equally applicable here is you do usability studies, right? Have people try it, just watch people use your product, see how it goes. Watch them, see what the pain points are. These days you could do it over Zoom, right? Have somebody have a Zoom call or use Microsoft Teams, and watch somebody use the product and see what goes right and see what doesn't. So there's lots of other activities that the accelerator really helped with. Nothing that you can't do on your own, but the accelerator provides a crucible in which you really, really can do this very quickly. One of the other things that we realized really quickly is there are times when you really should outsource something. And you need money in order to do this, but you don't need a lot of money. So on the left here, so my official title at MetricsHub was Chief Design Officer. Suffice to say, I am not an icon designer. So the logo on the left, that is the original logo that I came up with. You can see it's very, very creative. It has the 2 letters from the words of our name on a black box. Once we knew that we were targeting the cloud, I came up with that logo in the middle, which is a cloud with a smiley face on it. Again, maybe this isn't the most professional looking logo that's out there. So what did we do? We had a paid logo contest, and there's websites where you can do this at, where you just say that you have a reward and let people submit the logos, and whichever logo wins, they get paid their reward. So it's a good way to get a wide variety of logos, and this is the example of the logo that we ended up going with. So it's not quite the fanciest logo in the world, but it works, right? It's clear. You can see there's monitoring in that. There's the cloud. It makes sense, right? So there are always going to be things that you can't do So you just find a way to make a little bit of money go a long way as you go and build it out. This is one of the other tools that we used inside the accelerator. It's another one of these boards that we use, and this is just, I took a random snapshot in time here, and it's a little bit different than the lean canvas. This is once you've already started executing, right? So dive in a little bit more. What are the partners that you're going to be working with? What are the customer relationships that you're going to have? How are you going to do it? And you can see this is just some initial thinking, but we iterated on this literally every single week. We would add things, we would remove things, we added things back. So based on customer feedback, we removed uptimes and SLAs because we weren't really hearing that. We were hearing more about operating costs. But the next week, we actually added it back because we talked to more customers and we got more data. Phone support, we're like, phone support, that'll scale, right? Well, as we got something like 300 customers, you can't do phone support. So instead, we did email support. So this stuff iterates, and in a startup, and especially in an accelerator, it iterates very, very, very quickly. So as you build out your business model, and I'm not certain if this website is still there. I hope it is because it was useful. You can see the link there. Use tools like this to structure the process that you're going through. And then the accelerator wrapped up with demo day. So demo day was the kind of the culmination of the accelerator. So this was in January, and it was the opportunity to find investors. So as we start getting towards the end of the startup journey, the question is, okay, how did we get acquired by Microsoft? Well, we did a couple things. One, you may know Scott Guthrie. He wears a red polo. He's the head of cloud and AI inside of Microsoft. He was a mentor in the program. So he mentored us. So he knew what we were doing. And we actually asked him to introduce us at demo day. So having a mentor come on stage and kind of put themselves out there for you inside of the demo day, that's a way to build that relationship. So building relationships with people is one of the most important ways to be able to prime these ideas of an acquisition or a partnership or a customer. It's all of these things. Mentors aren't just executives in companies that might acquire you. They also may be a CEO of a company that could be a big customer of the product that you want. But taking advantage of that. So the demo day itself, what we did is really it's about providing the why, not the how. It's about convincing investors, new mentors, and building brand awareness. I mean, the Techstars demo day gets coverage in GeekWire and lots of publications, and this is one of the ways that you get really a lot of focus. So this is something that is kind of unique to an accelerator, right? You're not going to get something like a demo day from just working on your own, but it's really important. So to summarize the acquisition and the experience in the acquisition, I would say one of my top takeaways is it was extraordinarily intense. It is the hardest I have ever worked in my life. I have worked way less since I came to Microsoft, and that's not to say I don't work hard at Microsoft. Because I do. But the startup is literally nonstop. It is, you wake up, you go into the office, and you're there the entire day, through dinner, after dinner, weekends, holidays. This was the first time, for example, that I didn't even see my family over Christmas because we just focused on the startup. And this can be emotionally challenging. It's mentally taxing. It's emotionally taxing. It was a lot of work. And this is another reason why a startup can be successful if you put 110% in it. If you do it as a side project on your own, you're not going to get the traction. You're not going to get the focus that we got inside of an accelerator. But the accelerator was important because it provided that framework that is really important. Yeah. So I'll stop here again. Yeah.
Yeah, Stephen, thank you so much. This is really awesome, like to hear about the stories here. And we get a couple of questions, and I want to go through. People are posting questions in the Q&A. So for the first attendee, which is anonymous, but I'm just gonna ask a question on behalf of him or her. And for the other two, please, I already enable the talking capability. So please feel free to talk when it's your turn. So the first question is how to find reliable mentor. So
Yeah. So the way that we did it inside of the accelerator is the accelerator provided that connection. So that was one of the big assets of the accelerator, was the fact that by going through the accelerator, they had people who wanted to be involved. I would say, outside of an accelerator, it's about building the network and making connections in groups like these. There's lots of other types of meetups inside of Seattle, online these days, I assume. But it's really about building that network and getting out there, talking to people, making connections. Wherever you work right now, there may be people who know people that have experience in startups, or even just experiences in the industry, right? Reaching out to people, and you can try even reaching out cold, but we didn't do that specifically. But it's really just about working your network and finding people through these connections that would be willing to help. And there was another part of that question, which was reliable. Not all mentors are going to be reliable. So we did have a couple people who maybe weren't necessarily the most reliable mentors, and that's fine. Like you can learn very quickly how valuable a mentor is, and if some of them aren't going to be reliable, that's okay. You can learn a little bit from them, and then you can move on. So it does take some time and some iteration to get the people who really are have the experience. Some people don't, and that's perfectly okay.
Yeah, thank you so much for mentioning SEC. So I think SEC can provide some help in the sense of finding some reliable mentors. So yeah, next question. Let me see. Qing-Song, it's your turn.
So my question is like, when you choose, right, are you choose Azure at the beginning, not AWS? So if you do that one, what's the reason for that? Oh,
yeah, it's a great question. So there is, I'd say, two reasons. One practical and the other political. So the political reason is because we knew that Microsoft was going to do an accelerator, and by creating something that targeted Azure, we knew that that would increase the connections that we could make in the accelerator. But there was also a practical one, which is Azure at the time, especially at the time, was more nascent, right? So it had lots of customers, but it had a much smaller ecosystem of tooling around it, which meant that by going after the smaller market, it actually enabled us to get a bigger share of that particular market. I mentioned in the Lean Canvas that there were competitors out there, but there weren't really any competitors taking Azure seriously because everybody was focused on AWS. Nobody was focused on delivering a high quality experience for Azure users. So by going after Azure, that allowed us to basically capture all of the mind share of that market and grow with it. Now, that being said, after the accelerator ended, we did add AWS support. So it wasn't about just Azure, but it helped us really get off the ground by getting that awareness, by going after what is a smaller total addressable market, but a place where we could get more mind share, more market share.
Right. Thank you, Stephen. Does it answer your question, Junzong?
Yes, I think if you think about another way, right? I think you talk about at the beginning, you're talking about Windows Phone, right? If that case for Windows Phone, if we target for the phone scenario, if we target Windows Phone, we may end of lose, right? Because Windows Phone later disappeared, right?
Yep.
But in other case, the success, right? And then your company success, right? So it's a little bit dangerous also choose something like a smaller market as well, right?
Yes. No, it's definitely a risk. I would say, you know, there are risks of varying levels that you take inside a startup. And one of the things that is particularly valuable about a startup is you can be more agile and you can pivot. I mean, we pivoted multiple times inside of MetricsHub, and we were only around for less than a year. So, you know, let's say hypothetically we had done something for Windows Phone. As it became clearer that Windows Phone was not going to be successful in the long run, we definitely would have pivoted to something else. But you're right, you know, you lose a lot of time if you do that, which can be, you know, you may run out of runway if you don't have the resources. So it is definitely a risk. It's one that paid off for us. You know, may not be guaranteed to pay off, but it is a strategy that can work. It's in terms of business models, there's this concept of a cloning business strategy, where you take something that works in one market and you just do the exact same thing in a different market that is unaddressed. I think it's used typically when you talk about geographical distribution of markets, right? You know, take something that works well in the US and do it in Europe if there's nothing in Europe for it. But the same thing could be true in marketplaces like these.
Right, cool. Let's move on to the next question then. Hank.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, what was the size of your startup in terms of people, and what was the composition in terms of dev versus business people? And if you were to change it now, what do you think would be the ideal size and composition?
Yeah, so it was 3 of us. So myself, Charles, and Ilya. And Charles and Ilya were engineers, and I am and was a PM at Microsoft. So I had a little bit more of the customer focus, but I am not a business person. So in the startup, we actually did not have anybody that you know, had an MBA or business experience. You know, for us, I would say it worked out very well. So I wouldn't necessarily change that composition and have you know, a business person. I think the composition, you can make it work with a wide varieties of different types of roles. You know, for a startup that is targeting technology, I think, you know, like we were targeting Azure, I think being very engineering led was something that made us pretty successful. But you know, having somebody who is more familiar with the business side, had we been around longer, would have been really important. I mean, that would have probably been our next hire. You know, maybe would have hired more engineers, but we probably would have hired somebody on the business side who had experience as well.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
All right, thank you. We got so many questions. We still have 2 more questions. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so next one, let me see who is next. All right, I'll allow you to talk. Hero and ALPS. It's your time.
Hi there. So basically, thank you very much for your fascinating presentation. I enjoyed it very much. My question is, so basically the cloud monitoring market is pretty much crowded. since this cloud has evolved as large scale business, I just wonder, like Datadog, Dynatrace, it's not really easy to get a line share from the market. I just wonder what's the core competency of your company, which make it sense out and be acquired by Microsoft.
Yeah,
technically wise, technical wise.
Yeah. So I guess I didn't talk about it too much, but there was another pivot that we did, or that was really, really important. So you're right. Monitoring is really crowded. There's a lot of people who do monitoring. But the last pivot we did, and we did this during the accelerator, after in some sense we learned that the market was crowded. What we actually did is we pivoted to auto scaling. So we learned from customers that the pain point wasn't necessarily that I can't get visibility into what's going on. The pain point is I want to make sure my infrastructure actually runs, right? The reason why monitoring exists isn't for the sake of monitoring. The reason why monitoring exists is so that way they can make their service be successful and stay up. And what we realized is auto scaling. There's also auto healing. It was an important piece of this, which is if a particular node crashes, being able to reboot that thing. So those are the two big things that we focused on. We pivoted from a purely passive, just pay attention perspective to we actually take automatic action on behalf of the customer inside of their cloud infrastructure. And at the time, there was nobody doing this. There was nobody doing this for Azure at all. And I'm trying to think if there was really anybody doing this for AWS at the time. Definitely not to the point today where you have a lot of this stuff kind of built into the platforms. So that's how we were able to carve out something unique, was by looking at the market and understanding that, yeah, just monitoring alone isn't going to be enough to carve out something unique. Yeah, I don't know if we this calling out, for example, reduce operating costs, scalability, those types of things. Like these are things that we learned as a part of the accelerator. Really, yeah.
Okay, so as a follow-up question, basically you mentioned auto scaling. How to compare the auto scaling on serverless, versus microservices you are working on. Like what the perspective of the granularity between the serverless and the microservices.
So serverless didn't really exist in 2012.
For sure.
Yeah, so it was a little bit of a different time. Serverless, in a sense, has solved this problem, right? Okay. Like you don't. There are if you use, for example, Azure VMs, or you use EC2, you do still need auto scale, right? Because with EC2, you got to have your machines, and you have to have a certain number of those machines, and they increase and decrease over time. Like you're managing the infrastructure as a service. For serverless, not everything can run in serverless, but if it can, you're not going to have to worry about any of the underlying infrastructure. So autoscale specifically wouldn't be applicable. But luckily, we were in the market at a time where serverless didn't yet exist and wasn't, I think, as clear of a motion by customers. Although today, I think my guess would be still, IaaS outnumbers serverless in terms of just the amount of stuff that's there. But yeah, it's a good point.
Okay, definitely. Thank you very much. But on that note, I just want to have a quick comment. So basically, serverless also needs some monitoring. I think Datadog has integrated some tools for the serverless monitoring. So there's still some work to be done. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, and I think that still understanding the health of the system. So with serverless, you don't have to worry about scale and auto heal and those types of things, but you could still have bugs in your code, for example.
That's right. That's right.
So that type of health monitoring is still very valuable.
Yeah. X-ray is basically like a debugging tool for AWS serverless functions.
Yep. Makes sense.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions?
Hey, the last one is probably me. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
You talk to a lot of customers and you hear a lot of pain points. I wanted to know when you decide what are the set of features to work on for the MVP, the prioritization at the time for the startups, is that the same logics when you're doing prioritizations for Microsoft today? I mean, based on the limited resources you have as a startup, what would be the differences when you're doing the prioritizations of features to work on?
That is a great question. I think when you're at a startup, everything is on an accelerated timescale, and there are things that you are going after that may be a little different than what you're going after at Microsoft, which, as I say, the difference is at a startup, you're going for rapid growth. So you're going to build the features that may be unsustainable from an architecture point of view, from an implementation point of view. Like there's, oftentimes in startup land, you'll talk about, you may not even have implemented the feature for real, right? You may have a human who is actually sitting in an office and doing the feature, right? So that is something that makes a lot of sense in a startup. So in terms of prioritization, you're going to prioritize things that get you traction as quickly as possible. The flip side is for Microsoft, or this is true for any mature business, not just Microsoft, you have to think a lot more about the sustainability of what you're building and make sure that it's set up to still be there a year, 2 years, 5 years down the road. So prioritizing architectural investments, prioritizing making sure that you have supportability, for example, that because the other thing that's different between a startup and Microsoft is at a startup, the people writing the code are also going to be the people who are servicing, are also going to be the support engineers, who are also going to be the customer service reps, right? It's literally all one set of people, at least when you're a relatively small company. So you don't need to spend time building support tooling and architecture so that way a support engineer can understand what's going on, because literally everybody on the product can just attach the debugger and see what goes wrong if something goes wrong. When you're at Microsoft, you're going to have a set of people who are support engineers, a set of people who are customer service reps, all of these different roles, and you have to make sure that the features are built in such a way that you can enable those people to be successful. So it changes, how you build pretty dramatically. And I'd say that's probably the number one thing. I think it also is different, the profile of customers that you go after, right? So at a startup, you may go after kind of smaller businesses that are much faster. The deal time with direct purchase is very different than at Microsoft, where you may be negotiating with an account team for a few months to get a big deal signed. So the types of features that you build for those big companies are going to be different from the types of features you build for a startup that can just go purchase in 5 seconds.
Cool, thank you. So next one, I hope it's the last one for this stage. And let's pause here and we can take more questions later, since we need to control a little bit on the pace.
Sure, no problem.
Great. Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Steven, for sharing. My
Yeah.
question is, could you give some suggestions for like a startup building technology solutions, like for health, like physical therapy, those kind of area to get acquired?
Yeah, so I think actually, why don't I will move to the next slide. Trying to be acquired is not actually a great way to be acquired. And the reason I bring that up is because if you try to build a company that will be successful in the long run, you will build the right fundamentals in terms of traction, in terms of focusing on what customers need. But if you try to build a company that is focused purely on exiting as quickly as possible, you may make decisions that don't accrue to customer value, which means if an exit doesn't happen, you're in a lot of trouble. So the important thing there is really about getting customers quickly. It's about finding ways to get people looking at your product, using your product, and finding a marketplace is one tactic that we use that was really successful. So concretely, inside of Azure and AWS, there was this concept of a marketplace where you could just list your offers, and all of the discovery and commerce and those things were handled automatically. So we didn't have to set up a lot of that tech, which made it very, very easy for people to discover a product. So you mentioned, you're looking at, something with physical therapy, technology. Like the advice I would give you in terms of how to get acquired is actually the same advice I would give you for how to not get acquired, or how to build such a business that doesn't need to be acquired. And it's just talk to customers, understand what their pain points are, build that repertoire of knowledge, and build a product that has demonstrable value for a subset of the customers. And you can start, for example, by giving stuff away for free. Like, you don't have to monetize, but you do have to have evidence that what you're doing is something that is truly solving customer pain points, something that actually has product market fit. And for something that physical therapy, I mean, if you kind of map that to the tactics that I was thinking about in terms of just cold emailing people, right? With physical therapy, there's lots of local clinics that are around. Maybe just literally walk into one of them and ask, is there someone that you could talk to that would be interested in having a conversation about what their pain points are? Or email is probably more scalable. Well, yeah, these days you shouldn't walk around into those things, but really getting that customer traction is important. And once you have that, then building the relationships with a major healthcare system, building the relationship with UW Health or with other Primera or Swedish or any of these types of things. I don't know a whole lot about the industry, but I think you get the idea. Like, building the relationship with those types of things, you can do it via your customers. But really, it's when you build those relationships, it's not for the purpose of an exit. It's for the purpose of just having those customers and that data and building partnerships. Maybe they will be customers, maybe they'll partners. And if you're lucky, maybe they will want to acquire you, right? But if that's top of your mind, you're not necessarily going to be as successful as if what you're focused on is just the product market fit and the solving the pain points for the customers.
Right.
Is that helpful?
Seems, I believe is helpful. So yeah, let's move on, Stephen. Thank you.
Okay, great. I can talk a little bit about what it's like to be acquired. What actually happens. Once you make a decision to agree to be acquired, it doesn't actually happen immediately. There's a bunch of stuff that has to happen in order for an acquisition to happen. And this phase is called the due diligence phase. And the size and the length of this process can be proportional to how deep and extensive your product is. Ours, luckily, was a product that hadn't been around for very long, so there wasn't a whole lot of due diligence. But among other things, what happens is they do a security audit, for example. They make sure that there aren't major security problems with your offering, because for Microsoft, that can incur risk, right? Once a company is acquired by Microsoft, it becomes a target. So they actually, what they do is they have, an independent assessor, look at your product and make sure that it's fine. And the reason why it's an independent company is, if for whatever reason the acquisition doesn't go forward during due diligence, they want to make sure that there isn't any kind of proprietary information that has, crossed the barrier between the acquirer and the target for acquisition. So the important thing about due diligence is it helps the company that's acquiring you to make sure that everything that you've done is on the up and up, right? You literally have to show them all of your finances, literally every single bank statement, every single customer relationship, all of it gets sent over and verified to ensure that everything is right. And, some concrete examples like, make sure that you actually own all of your IP. So information, intellectual property is really important because if you, for example, have used a lot of open source libraries that are copyleft, so GPL and those types of things, that actually may have a lot of implications on whether or not you are even allowed to sell the company to an acquisition target. Because if you don't own the IP, because with copyleft, you don't actually own the IP, it's open source. So there are licenses that you can use. So if you use BSD or MIT license, those licenses are perfectly fine. But if you have a bunch of software that's GPL, you're actually, that's going to be a problem. And another way that this can be a pitfall is if you have a customer contract and you've done what is classified as work for hire. So basically, if for that customer, you build a bunch of unique intellectual property and that customer owns that intellectual property, that means you can't sell it if you're going to do an acquisition. Because it's owned by the customer, it's not owned by you. So it's really important, even for a startup, even if you just have 3 people, to pay attention to ownership of intellectual property, to make sure that everything that you're doing, if you are using open source, that you look at the license, that if you have attribution requirements, that you say, this is the source that I got it from. And for some licenses, you do have to do attribution. And you've got to be really careful if you're using any GPL or copyleft licenses. So anyway, this is basically what takes a bunch of time between the the initial kind of discussion about acquisition and the final, hey, now it's okay to be acquired. Any questions on this?
Yeah, Stephen, one quick question though. Did you get other acquire requests from other companies other than Microsoft?
No, I don't think so. But something to keep in mind is the timeline was very accelerated, right? I mean, basically, we had just had demo day, and we were pretty explicit that our goal was to grow the product and be successful. I mean, that's the key thing on this point, and that's why, for example, after demo day, we went and we built MetricsHub for AWS, because our goal was to continue growing the product and to raise money from investors. So we met with investors, we went down to Silicon Valley, Sand Hill Road, all that jazz, to get to drum up excitement. But the acquisition happened fast enough that that wasn't something that happened.
I see. Thank you.
Cool. So the last topic that I have is our experience inside Microsoft. So I already, there was a great question earlier that touched on this already, but we pivoted. The most important thing is pivoting the way you work. The complete difference between a startup and Microsoft is whether or not you're doing all the jobs or one job, right? In Microsoft, there are going to be 1,000 people who have other jobs to help you out, right? There's going to be people in support. There's going to be people in sales. There's going to be people in marketing. There's going to be people in research. And all of these people, it's not their sole job to help you, but they can do things that you can leverage and take advantage of. So the most important thing once we got acquired was figuring out very, very quickly, what was it that we still needed to do ourselves? And what was it that we could have other people in the organization do for us? So we changed our jobs. Like when I was, chief design officer, I was the one who talked to customers to get them to, or one of several, Charles also did as well. Talk to customers to get them to get the product. We don't need to do that at Microsoft because we have other people who do that. So that's the biggest change that happened immediately. And basically what we did is we went and we integrated the MetricsHub tech into Azure as quickly as possible. And it took us 3 months. So this is abnormally quick for an integration. These can take a lot longer than that, but we worked really hard and we got it integrated very, very quickly. So that way Azure by June had native integration with Azure Autoscale. And the way we did this was by figuring out quickly what was it that we needed to do and what was it that other people inside Microsoft could do. And from there, the journey was we continued to expand and build it. In fact, the project that I'm working on today is still built on the exact same core tech that came from MetricsHub. So that core technology is still around in 2020 after we started it in those few months at the beginning of 2013. So if you build on that foundation and you just continue iterating and getting customer feedback and pivoting, you can build something that really lasts. And I think that was it that I had in terms of prepared content. So yeah, other questions or thoughts or anything?
Yeah, feel free to ask questions. Right now is dedicated Q&A section, so don't be shy. I'm pretty sure that this share has been really fantastic, and it was great to know this much about your experience. And yeah, just since we're waiting for people to think of what kind of question they may have. So one question from my side is, right now you're working on Power Automate as a PM director. So do you have any plan, in what case or what situation you may consider doing startup again, or is it triggered by idea, or is it triggered by the industry, just things like that?
Yeah, so I'll go back to kind of what I said at the beginning. The idea isn't really that important, right? An idea is, it's very ephemeral. So just having an idea would not be enough to go and do a startup. I think that when we did MetricsHub, it was at a very important inflection point in the industry that we thought was happening, which was the move to the cloud, right? This was an area at the time. I mean, it's kind of weird to think about it today, but there were a lot of people who said that the cloud wouldn't be successful, right? That companies would not trust their data in the cloud. That companies will always want to own their data locally on their machines. So that wasn't something that we believed. So we did identify an important trend in the broader industry and get in at what we thought was the right time. So I think that being convicted on that front is really important. Whenever you're deciding to kind of change what you're doing. I have, personally, I have absolutely no plans to change at this point. But I do think that when you're looking at, what for yourself would be the right thing to do, I think it really comes down to building the right team, right? Having the right set of people around you, being at, having a core hypothesis about an industry. And the accelerator, I really don't want to play down the importance of an accelerator. It doesn't have to be Techstars or YC. There's lots of other accelerators out there. I strongly recommend Techstars. I mean, it was, truly an invaluable experience. But getting into the accelerator was a big decision point for us, right? Because that was an opportunity for us to get all this experience, to get those mentors, to get the tools that are really, really important. So yeah, that would kind of be my general advice.
I see. Thank you. Yeah. All right. Others, any questions? All right, here we go.
Hey there, hey Steve. So I just wonder, so I may ask a general question. So
sure.
If you were about to do that from scratch, what have you done differently nowadays?
I would say the time in between when we started the accelerator, or between when we started MetricsHub and we joined the accelerator, was basically wasted time in a sense, because we thought we had an idea and that the idea would be what would make us successful. And we weren't really talking to customers and listening to their pain points. And we wrote code and literally none of that code went anywhere, right? Yeah. So I think if I could do anything differently, it would be to write less code up front. Like at the beginning, you literally should just not write code. Like, you don't write any code. Just do the business exploration to understand what is useful. Yeah, and I think the other thing, when we talked about the roles in the company, we didn't have anybody from biz dev, so I don't think we got as much customer traction as we could have if we had somebody focused in that space. So we got hundreds of customers, with a startup in a couple months, which is actually, that's still pretty impressive for something where it's not a B2C, right? It's a B2B business. So like that's good. But I do think, if we had somebody who had more experience in that role, we probably could have grown even faster and gotten even more traction in the market sooner.
Okay. That sounds like a really fascinating experience. So how do you compare like a Techstar, versus some other incubators like Y Combinator?
So to be entirely honest, I haven't paid a whole lot of attention in the past few years to how these things have evolved. I mean, the big difference at the time, at least, between YC and Techstars was YC had really, really big classes. So I think they had like 50 or something, and they were all only in Silicon Valley, and they did them maybe twice a year. I don't remember exactly. But as a result, as a result, you got way less hands-on teaching and mentorship than we did with Techstars. Like Techstars was a class of 10, right? So it was very, very small compared to YC, and it was way more hands-on. Like a lot of mentorship, a lot of very concrete and specific advice about the tools and the lean methodology. Like this is what Techstars uses these days. But this is a different approach. I think YC tends to be a little bit more hands-off, or at least it did at the time.
Yeah.
And with regard to other accelerators out there, I haven't really paid as much attention, but I'm sure that a lot of the other accelerators have different characteristics. And yeah, I'm sure there's lots of good podcasts to listen to comparing accelerators.
Of course, yeah, definitely. If I can put it a little bit simple, it's more of a liberal arts college to Ivy League, but you get more hands-on and more mentorship, from your experience from
that's an interesting
like Techstar. Yeah.
No.
Thank you very much. It has been fascinating.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool, thank you. All right, hello.
Hi, hello. Hi, Stephen. Thank you for the awesome presentation. I have a quick question. So I used to work at Microsoft. That was 2010, about 10 years ago. I had a mentor in my team. His company was acquired by Microsoft. And I think he signed a contract that he had to work at Microsoft for 2 years. And right after the 2 years ended, he left Microsoft, and in his opinion, Microsoft was, he was pretty bored at the time because it was Windows. Obviously looks like you have been very successful in both your startup and also in Microsoft as a big, huge company. So, so what's your plan in the future? I mean, do you plan to do another startup, or you plan to just climb the ladder even further? I mean, I just want to hear about your thoughts.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think one of the big things that I realized, inside of Microsoft is there's a big difference between the areas where you can work on a service and where you don't. And much more of Microsoft has switched to the service approach over the past 10 years. So I think one of the things that I personally really enjoyed about Microsoft as compared to hypothetically working on Windows or something is like literally every single week we're delivering value to customers. So it's like I can't even picture being bored at my job. Stressed definitely, but bored is not something that happens, and it's because there's always more to do, and there's always more customer value to deliver, and there's always customers asking for more stuff and more pain points to go solve. And with a service, you can iterate on that super quickly. So with Power Automate, which is the service that I work on today, we release stuff every week. Like literally every week, there's new features, there's new capabilities, we're fixing bugs, we're making bugs. It just goes on and on. And I think that cycle is something that really excites me. And personally, I have no plans to do anything different. I think the things that we're doing with Power Automate are actually really exciting. We just I don't know, people heard much about RPA or what that is, but we've been working on Power Automate a lot on robotic process automation, RPA, and we just released our latest set of functionality to general availability last week. So yeah, I'm really excited with kind of the things that we're doing and where we're going today inside of Microsoft.
Right, cool. Yeah, but at the same time, I would say industry is changing a lot, right? Really quick. So who knows?
Yep.
And any other question? All right, let me see. Someone post in Q&A. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's start from people who posted Q&A, do you want to talk, or just I can ask a question on behalf of you? But anyways, I just ask. Can you share Techstars requirements? How long can you stay at Techstars? I heard startup can be in Techstars for 3 months.
Yes, that's correct. So we started at the end of September, and demo day was at the beginning of January. So I think it was a little bit over 3 months technically, because of the way the months fell and Christmas was in the middle there. But yeah, it is an accelerator, so it's short. It's it's a very fast thing.
Right. Cool. So next question. Do you feel you're losing the ownership or decision power of the products? I think he meant to say in Microsoft. So
yeah, no, it's a great question. I would say at Microsoft, it is much more collaborative and collective with decision making than you would at a startup, and that is absolutely true. I mean, at a startup, you don't have time to negotiate or learn what the right thing is going to be by talking to other people inside your company necessarily. And even if you do, if you only have 3 people, you can literally just turn around, look at each other, have a 5-minute conversation, and then be good to go. Microsoft is much more deliberate with its decision-making process. And that's because it takes, you learn a lot more from the diverse voices that you have inside of a bigger company, right? With a startup, there's not a lot of diversity there because by definition, you can have, a couple people, right? But at Microsoft, you do have, a lot more inputs. And that's because these are people who are experts in a wide variety of areas, right? I'm not an expert in marketing at all, right? But the person that I work with in marketing knows a lot about marketing and knows what kind of the best ways to go and market our product are. So in a startup, I would just make a decision about marketing and I wouldn't talk to anybody, and that might be faster, maybe, but is it better? Almost certainly not, right? Because with the advantage of having people who can specialize in these disciplines and can bring these diverse viewpoints, you can really get something that in the long run is a much stronger and more sustainable model. But it is you do cede some of that control in return, you get something that I think is much better and much more sustainable.
A follow-up question though, how about the satisfaction? Like, how was the satisfaction? Like I'm pretty sure when you were in the startup and then you got acquired within such a short time, and it was really amazing, right? That was really fascinating. And right now you have been working in Microsoft since 2013, and like what's the experience compared with the experience in startup before? Are you getting same satisfaction level, or are you happy with that? Like things like that.
Yes. So no, I am very happy with what I'm doing in Microsoft. I think there are obviously pros and cons. The most obvious pro is with Microsoft is the stability and the reduced stress. I mean, with a startup, literally at any point you can fail catastrophically, right? You have, it's an incredible amount of risk. Something like 98% of all startups fail. Mm-hmm. Not get acquired, but literally just outright fail, go bankrupt. So it's, there's a ton of risk there, and that weighs on you, right? At Microsoft, it's a very different experience, right? There's still risk. Obviously, you don't want to, make the wrong decision for Microsoft or for the company, and you are going to, take risks, but it's a very different, I'd say, level of stress and level of work than it would be inside of a startup. And like I said, you lose total control over everything that you're doing, right? You no longer are a three-person army. You're an army of thousands, and that does involve a different set of skills and different set of learnings and those types of things. But I wouldn't say it's any worse at all. I mean, I think the learning how to take advantage of those relationships and how to make them be successful for the product overall is something that I think is really useful and I enjoy doing.
Cool, thanks. We got new questions in the Q&A. Well, I'm not sure if you were comfortable with that, but yeah, I just ask. What if your idea conflict with the idea of your manager? Will you be concerned with performance review? And I guess your manager is Charles, who is your partner.
Yes, no, that's true. So, at Microsoft, I think we focus a lot on, or at least in the teams that I've always worked on, at being data driven. So it's really the same things with the startup, right? It's like, how do we prove that these are the ideas or these are the solutions for the pain point? It's like we talk to customers. It's no different inside of Microsoft. The difference, there is a difference. It's actually way easier for us to get customer feedback with Microsoft than it would be at a startup. So where I'm going with this is, if I have one idea and my boss has a different idea, it's just a matter of collecting the data, right? I have one hypothesis, other people have different hypotheses. The people on my team, we may have completely different ideas, but what matters is, developing the evidence, go to, do research, look at telemetry, talk to customers, understand where it's coming from. And that, I think, is how you can, get to a point where you can come up with a solution that actually is the best solution, because it doesn't really matter who's right and who's wrong. What matters is what's the best thing for the product. And, that you can get to by searching for the real underlying truth in the data.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. That's a general career growth question, I think. All right, cool. Next question. Charlie, you want to ask yourself? Hello? All right, never mind. I'll just answer a question on behalf of you. How would you deal with power dynamics leading, working with the industry veterans, influence behaviors and change future? I think that's a specific question to the product you're working on.
Yes, could you repeat that? I don't know if I can actually.
Let me send the question over chat so that you can check.
Yeah, so actually I've seen it. How do you deal with?
Yeah, in the Q&A. Sorry.
Yeah, so I would guess that this is a question around like for mentors and those types of things. How do you deal with them if there's different power dynamics or other influencers? And I think the best thing I can say there is when you're working with other people, keeping an open mind, understanding the perspective that they're coming from. Ultimately, you are responsible for the decisions that you're making, and taking that input from others. If there are industry veterans, and respecting that they have experience, but also that they may not be omnipotent. They may not know everything that's going on. So being empathetic and listening is, one thing, and you just have to balance that against the data that you have for your product, and just weigh those two things.
Great, thank you. I hope that answers the question, because I noticed Charlie was dropping off for like a minute, but he's back now.
Okay. Cool.
Let me see. Charlie is raising hand again, so I'm going to allow.
Yeah. Hi, this is Charlie. Thank you, Stefan. The question is, it's about most of the question for an engineer, I was told, is to influence behaviors and driving for the common good. So everything is good when everyone agree, and there might be conflicts arise in the dynamics, especially if a product is shifting or pivoting. So how would you say you could influence these behaviors and deal with the power dynamics there? Yeah,
it's a great question. I don't think there's any easy answer there. When you have shifting dynamics, I think it's important to level set on the core priorities. So basically, like, make sure that first everybody is aligned on kind of the core principles. And if people aren't aligned on the core principles, then that really is the first thing to go and solve. And ultimately, it's there's going to be some sort of reckoning that has to happen. Whether or not you have a hierarchical structure or a collaborative structure of aligning on kind of what the core goals are and the core principles. Once you have that, you can then build on that with data, right? If you can make a case that something that you want or that you don't want aligns with or does not align with those core principles, and then bring the evidence for that can help. But I think it's also important to keep in mind that like, people aren't robots, right? There's also an emotional component to it. So the way that you go about having these types of conversations is almost just as important as the what that you say in the conversations. So when you're having hard conversations about what those core priorities, being empathetic, just spending a lot of time listening is really, really important. Because if you're always trying to jump in, you're always trying to do something, it's you're not giving the space for the other people to pay attention. So spending the time listening, spending the time to empathize and understanding, and leading by example. If you're not in charge, you can still set this example and hope that the other people around you pick up on that and do the same for you. So yeah, that I think is the best that I have there. But yeah, there's no easy solution for that one. It's going to be tough in any situation, but there are some things that you can try.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say on top of that, I would suggest you go read How to Win Friends and Influence Others.
Yeah. The idea of data-driven and empathy. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the question though. Thanks. All right. I think, let me see. Let's wait for 1 minute to see if anyone else has question.
Right.
Yeah, but at the same time, I want to say really, I really appreciate your time and like your willingness to share your experience. And I think we all know that doing startup is hard, and especially at this 2020, and everybody just working from home, and even we don't get the chance to go to customers to get feedback. Yeah, for sure. Things are changing really fast, and we're just learning every day. So yeah, I appreciate all the learnings and shares, and hope like. For back to the Seattle Entrepreneurship Club, and what we are doing is just to make sure we're getting this kind of help from this community and to help each other. So yeah, it seems like we don't have other questions. So yeah, maybe that's it for today. And thank you so much, Stephen. I Hope you enjoy the share. And yeah, well, we get a new question. All right. All right, last question. Sorry. Since we are. All right. Go ahead.
I have a question here. So when you worked with your partner at the beginning of your startup, have you met some disagreement on some big decisions? How did you move forward?
You know, I think there were definitely, you know, disagreements, but I think for the most part, we were aligned because the core principles that we were operating under were basically the same, right? We all kind of bought in 100% to the kind of the Techstars program and the way that it was approaching, you know, all of the methodologies. So as long as you're bought in at a fundamental level, the decisions that go on top of that can always, you know, kind of accrue down to those core principles. So yeah, I mean, we obviously weren't always completely aligned, but given that we all have the same goal and we all kind of understand the tool set to get there, you can work through those problems and, you know, have those hard conversations and, you know, sleep on it sometimes, right? It's always a good way to do it as well. But yeah, it's it takes a little bit of time to build that muscle, but it's definitely something that's doable.
I see. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, cool. Thank you. Hope everyone enjoyed the talk, and thank you again, Stephen. Hope you have a nice weekend. Everyone have a nice weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.